Hello and welcome to this episode of the Anna Asks podcast, hosted by me, Anna Cusack. Today I am joined in conversation with Jess Nabb. Jess describes themselves as a feminist spaceholder, accessible yoga teacher, and nervous system witch. Whether you see Jess's frontline social media content or speak with them in private, their passion for and drive towards creating radical inclusion for all parents and carers is something to behold. Their work centres on recentering parents' and carers' own needs alongside and within our families, revillaging, the recognition and valuing of caregiving, and moving beyond the notion of safe spaces to the creation of brave ones. These are topics that really get my heart pumping, and I can think of no one I'd want to hear more from about them than Jess. So, Jess, welcome to you. It is so wonderful to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Before we do open up these most juicy avenues of conversation, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which I live, work and record, the Awabakal people, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and also extend that respect to any and all Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander and First Nations peoples who may be listening. Jess, would you like to do the same with reference to where you are situated?
Yeah, I'd love to acknowledge the country that I'm on, Wurundjeri country, and acknowledge those elders past, present and emerging too. Thank you.
Together we acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded and that this was always and always will be Aboriginal land. Okay, Jess, I was hoping that that introduction would give us all a bit of an insight into who you are and the work that you do. Is there any further self-introduction that you would like to offer?
Yeah, firstly, like hearing myself get introduced like that, I was like, ooh, who's that cool human? Like, it's kind of weird hearing someone else reflect back, like, yeah, like how you see me. It's really interesting and nice. I am white. I am high school educated. I'm queer, autistic, solo parent to a wildly neurodivergent child, non-binary. I feel like I'm missing something, but it'll come up if it needs to. But yeah, and I'm just really wildly passionate about inclusion and accessibility after my own lived experience of not really fitting any of the normative parenting spaces and feeling like it was my fault. And so sort of coming full circle and going, oh, wait, like I was kind of invited to the table but not given any food, like that kind of inclusion I've experienced. So
I just wanted to ask what radical inclusion is to you. Like, how is it different in your conceptualization from just simply inclusion? Why is it that this is such a guiding principle in your work and your life, this radical inclusion rather than just, oh, this is an inclusive program, space, whatever?
Yeah, I just defined it in a way there of that difference between being invited along, like, yeah, you can come be in this room with us, and actually being actively included and understood. I guess there's a different level of empathy and understanding when we're trying to include, for instance, I can give you an example of like women's spaces I've gone to as a non-binary person who uses they, them pronouns, and where I've been welcome to come along, but then the whole way through, the whole group has been referred to as ladies. And just little microaggressions like that can happen, or where I'm told, yeah, autistic people are welcome, or people with autism are welcome, which is the wrong languaging. So I immediately know that, oh, you haven't done your homework. But then heading into the space and being told not to let my disability define me, and that I shouldn't talk about myself that way when I call myself autistic. And so it's like I've been invited, but I'm not actually accepted for who I am or the way that I see the world. So I guess that's my version of radical inclusion, and the difference between just normal inclusion. And the other thing actually is that difference between reaching out to include people because we understand that our liberation is tied together, or almost like reaching down to help people in a more patronizing way. That's what radical inclusion is too. It's about equity, rather than, the only example I can think of is like the white savior complex, where white people try and help people of color and just end up being really patronizing and causing more harm. So that radical inclusion actually involves a bit more work and a bit more nuance and unpacking privilege, power dynamics, all of the things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I really love those examples that you've given, and I see just how relevant they are in working one-on-one with people, but also in the broader community sense. How are you bringing that sense of radical inclusion to the spaces that you are creating for your work, Jess?
That's a really good question, and it's still something that is emerging. I mean, my work is really quite new. I've only just moved into this season of my life where I can actually hold space for people. I've had quite a few false starts where I have set up my shingle to say, all right, I'm available to do this. And then life has happened and my child free time has evaporated again. And it's actually been like a really common pattern that was happening before the pandemic even happened. And so my child started school at the beginning of COVID, basically. So they started whatever year that was. It feels like it was forever. Was it 2020? I think so. They started school, and then by March we were in a pandemic, and we've just been in and out of lockdowns. And so I'm still only like tiptoeing out of the cave of early motherhood and parenthood and starting to be able to hold space again. And I'm actually really grateful for all of those false starts. I can say that now. At the time, it was kind of devastating and frustrating. But, you know, the lockdowns and the pandemic really shone a light on a lot of inequity and gave a lot of us time to really reflect on that inequality. And there's been a rise in family violence. There's been the whole Black Lives Matter movement. There's been so much happen in these last few years. And I'm going to go on a million tangents here. This is part of my neurodivergence. So I'm just like telling you now, I might not answer your question at all. We'll see what happens. But when the lockdown started for us, it actually opened up our world a lot. And I was just so incredibly lucky, privileged, blessed to find the accessible yoga community. And through that community and through like their equitable pricing for all of their offerings and scholarships, I've had the opportunity to just be in community for the first time since becoming a parent, basically. Like the isolation that our tiny family faced was just huge. And so being able to come into community that was trauma-informed and wildly radically inclusive, they have just been my model for how to do that. And it's almost like I can't actually quantify how I do that in a space, whether it's one-on-one one-on-one or a group, because it's something I've had and something I've experienced and something that I've soaked in like a sponge that now just permeates everything I do, to the point where it's actually really hard for me to be in spaces that aren't that inclusive, because I finally know what it feels like to be safe and to be honored, respected, celebrated, even for all of my quirks and idiosyncrasies, all of my difference, and all of the goodness and the richness that can bring as well. I don't know if that answers your question.
I'm happy with the answer, whether it's answered it or not. What it did bring to mind was I have actually felt some sadness or perhaps even grief to a degree over the last little while in New South Wales, that as things are, opening up for the masses, they seem to be closing for some people who might feel like they're more on the fringe. I was wondering if that's something that seems to be coming up in some of those places that have been safe and accessible spaces, or because they are held and operated in such a level of integrity anyway, that those spaces are mindful of that, and the people that hold that space kind of know that that would be potentially happening.
Yeah, it brings up a few things, and I'll start with personal experience, which is that I've just started to go out into the real world after the safety of Zoom, and it's hard. It's really hard. I think I really liked that with Zoom I could turn my video off if I didn't feel like being seen. I could mute myself. I could mute others if like I could just mute the call for a minute if something was coming up and I couldn't deal. And being in a space with lots of people, with more of an intersection of the community, like more of a wider spectrum of ideas, beliefs, ideologies, I'm experiencing way more like microaggressions and way more of the things that I've learned don't feel okay for me. And one of the things that I've loved about Zoom, and that I will definitely be bringing into any in-person events that I hold, is the group agreement. I feel like group agreements on Zoom calls have almost become like standard with a lot of the communities that I'm in. There's group agreements, and they will be things about how to use inclusive language, and how to be with discomfort when things come up, and when someone says, oh, that's not okay with me, and how not to be reactive. It's probably, as I'm saying this, I'm realizing it's probably the circles I move in online more than anything. But yeah, we don't seem to have those group agreements in in-person spaces. And so it might be partly my autistic, like, rule following brain doesn't know what the unspoken rules are in that in-person container. Whereas on Zoom, it's all spelled out for me. I can screenshot it and go back to it. It's something tangible I can look at. So yeah, I can really resonate with that feeling of grief, or I think for me, it's like just an uncertainty, a sort of low-level anxiety when I go into spaces, and just having to deal with more sensory input, and also deal with more just sticky social situations where I'm like, I don't know how to leave this conversation now. Whereas somehow online that's easier. The other thing that brought up for me, what you were saying, is the power of hybrid events, that a lot of for instance, the accessible yoga community, and also Community Music Victoria is another community I'm part of that really model that inclusion and accessibility perfectly. And both of those organizations, as they're starting to go back to the real world, are keeping online events as well, because they've realized how many in the community just aren't served by in-person events and need that contact with the world to be broadcast into their lounge room and into their computer. And yeah, hybrid events. I'm actually leading a choir this evening. It's my before parenthood job. It's the one little bit of pre-parenthood that I've kept, this one choir. And it's our first in-person rehearsal, but we're also doing it on Zoom, so that the people who just aren't ready to, who are worried about their health or maybe have immunocompromised, can still join in. And we've had some members move to Wales and they get to join in too. So it's a win-win.
That's so good. And I watched a video of yours the other day where you were singing, and you have such the most beautiful voice and layered all these additional melodies and harmonies and all the other bits that I don't know the proper words for on top of each other. And it was just beautiful. So that's been like a carrying thread for you from before you were a parent, your voice instruction.
Yeah.
It's not called that, is it?
Well, what I did was called natural voice work. So it was sort of about pushing back against the more elitist form of music making and singing, and making it accessible and inclusive to everyone, whether they've sung before or not, and normalizing that not everyone sounds like Beyonce, but we all get to sing. Like, it's just, I don't know many people who don't enjoy singing once they get past the layers of conditioning and shame and judgment that have been piled on by growing up in a world that sort of sees pop music or pop singers or whatever as the only way to do it. So it's really interesting looking back at that and realizing I've been doing this work all along, but I just didn't realize it. And coming through parenthood, like, I had a lot of trauma in my journey into parenthood, and so I actually lost my voice, which was huge, because as I was losing or changing my identity, that change in identity that we go through in matrescence, or I've got my non-gendered version that I'm playing with at the moment, which is natrescence with an N. But that journey into becoming a parent is already, it's pretty easy to lose yourself. Some people find themselves, some people lose themselves, there's, and every bit in between. But I also lost my voice, which had actually been my special interest since I was a kid. So it's followed me through my whole life. So to lose my voice was huge. And then because of my child's sensory sensitivities, they have a meltdown whenever I sing. So I just can't sing in my house unless they're being cared for by someone else. So yeah, even once I started to get my voice back, I haven't really been able to let it out. And it's been really difficult finding my new thing because of that, because it wasn't something that I consciously gave up. It was something that was kind of taken from me, for want of a better word.
That would have been so challenging, and to then have it on tap but not be able to use it on tap now that it is returned to you is perhaps another level of keeping yourself contained. That's the image that I had when you were talking about people not wanting to sing for fear of not being Beyonce. it's just another way that we're contained. Don't do this thing that's enjoyable. But then it's not even society that's telling you not to sing right now. It's the person that you love the most.
Yeah, and it's
That's
just
tricky.
like,
And it's not their choice either.
yeah, yeah, I feel terrible sometimes because it's also my main way of stimming and my main way of self-regulating. And so I do it unconsciously all the time. I just don't even notice I'm doing it until I hear or now it's become more of a you're doing it again. It's so perfect. It's quite funny, but I used to really feel for my child because they were living with a parent who kept singing, which was basically their only trigger. Other than that, pretty chilled little kid. So yeah, it's been interesting and it's been really nice to come back to it. And actually, I'd love to share that the reason that I posted myself singing, even though it has nothing to do with my work, is because I'm really fighting against that common business advice about niching down. Because I think, not just as a business owner, but as a parent, I'm a whole human. I'm a whole human with a whole lot of different interests, because I really want other parents to know that they get to be all of themselves when they're parenting, because we get so in so many areas of our life, as whether we're women or people who have been socialized as women, parents, business owners, we're really encouraged to like shear parts of ourselves off and to fit into certain boxes and to wear all these different hats. And I guess if I keep on with the hat analogy, instead of having a separate hat for everything, just having one big, really bright hat with like loads of different flowers on it that all represent a different thing. Yeah, hopefully that was followable. That's just where my brain went. But yeah, I'm just really passionate again with that radical inclusion. Like, how do we include all of ourselves? How do I bring all of me to parenthood? How do I bring like my sexuality into my day as a parent? Like, how do I bring my passion? How do I bring my creativity? How do I bring all of the threads of myself, instead of trying to fit into like the good parent model,
which is so impossibly narrow and impossible to attain.
Yeah.
And two-dimensional and boring.
Yeah.
Really, really boring. You tried it?
I tried it and I started wearing muted colors. Yeah. If you look at my Instagram, or if you could see me right now, you would see I'm wearing like a fluffy yellow cardigan and red glasses and an orange scarf. And like, this is what made me happy today. I very rarely just wear black or navy, or, it's just, there's nothing wrong with that, but it's just not me. But I started trying to like assimilate to this good parent model and just started wearing really, really neutral clothes. It was really strange.
Yeah, I got to about 12 or 18 months postpartum and I just realized that everything I owned was black and grey. It was really depressing. And I think Kmart pregnancy clothes are probably all pretty plain and boring like that. And I probably just stuck with it because I was too exhausted to try and do anything else much.
Yeah.
So I've been on a full spicing up, color, accessorizing everything, my life kind of thing as well. And very much on the same page of, I don't want my kid, they choose to be a parent when they're older, to have to feel like they're following any rules because they've seen me following the good parent rules either, because they're all just, my philosophy is generally that any of the rules in our society are made up to sell us things, so I don't want to know about them too much.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of it that way. They're made up to sell us things. It does make sense.
Sucks, hey?
Yeah.
You did mention in a roundabout way about the bringing the different parts of yourself to every day, to every element of your work, to every element of your public and private kind of presence. I know something that you are passionate about as well is radical self-care. So beyond the concept of, just the standard fruit and veg, have your walk, tick the boxes, and then, you should be perfectly fine. Your focus is radical self-care. So sometimes this can feel a bit like chicken or the egg situation. Like, what's your take on, do you start the self-care first and then the community care that you're looking for will kind of be formed out of that? Or do you need the community caring for you first in order to be able to take the steps for self-care?
That's an excellent question.
Or is it a bit of both, maybe?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think it's like a self-perpetuating cycle, I guess. And I immediately think of my own personal experience that I think it's been both. I can give you a really nice example of community care that I actually had to be quite brave to ask for, and basically in the height of the Melbourne lockdowns, I was really, really struggling. I was just so tired. My child wasn't sleeping through the night. I had no support, no time off. I think the playgrounds were shut at that point. So it was just like that time where we could just go out for an hour each day. And I got depressed, obviously. I don't think I'm alone there. But there's a community organization near me called Community Casseroles that cooks meals using food that's being thrown out by supermarkets. So they're using like the seconds or the cast-offs of the veggies, and they cook up meals and they give them to people in the community who are going through a hard time or for whatever reason just can't afford food or can't cook food, whatever it is. And it's totally free. And you can be nominated by someone or you can nominate yourself. And I just got to a point where I thought, you know what, like, I'm pretty sure I put it in my application. I'm a disabled solo parent to a disabled child, and I'm not waving, I'm drowning. Like, I need help. And just having food for myself and for my child sorted, just having our dinners sorted for a couple of weeks gave me the space to actually let go. I could let go of a little bit of the mental load. I could let go of the effect that was having on my body, having that mental load. I could allow myself to rest. And so then my self-care improved. And then I had a bit more headspace to, I think it was around that time that I found the accessible yoga community, and they were having a conference and they had scholarships available. And I'm pretty sure I said the same thing. I'm a disabled solo parent to a disabled child, and I'm struggling. And so I got a scholarship to their conference, and that was a huge turning point for me, being in a space where people used my pronouns and they used identity first language, autistic person, rather than person first language, person with autism, which, the majority of the autistic community prefer that identity first language. So without me having to educate them or anything, they already knew. And they even had an autistic person giving a talk at the conference about how to include us, And so that then reinvigorated my yoga practice, which had been taken from me by not only disability but some serious harm that I'd encountered with a teacher and a community. And I'd let my practice go completely, thinking, well, I can't do handstands, and I've been told by this teacher that if you can't do this, that's not yoga. And so that just undid a lot of trauma, actually, and really helped me to be in community and start to be able to co-regulate with people. And then that allowed me to do more self-care. And so it was sort of, that cycle that you definitely need both. And I actually have a framework that I work with that I call the circles of care, and it's that self-care in the center, and then you've got your family, and then you've got your community, and then we've got our culture, and then we've got the full collective. And the way that I see it, it should go both ways. The way that it is currently is often, particularly if you're a mother or a parent who's been socialized as a woman, you're in the center just giving out. And there's not that much coming back to you. So if we start in that central circle of self-care, we can actually start to close that feedback loop a little bit and say, okay, I'm just going to redirect some of that care that's going out back to me, and create a little bit of a feedback loop here. And then we could sort of venture out to the family and be like, okay, I'm giving all this care out. How can I get a little bit of care coming back to me from, how can I ask for my needs to be met by my partner or my children? Yes, that our children are not there to meet our needs. And also we are allowed to ask them for things. It's a relationship. It shouldn't just be give. We can sort of, I ask my child to stroke my hair sometimes when I'm stressed, and they're very happy to just pat my head a couple of times, and I'm so grateful for that care that I receive. And then we've got our community. How are we caring for our community, and how can we reach out and ask for help from our community? Community casseroles is a good example. I made a post on Instagram recently about a church that I joined as a non-religious tarot reading heretic. And the care that I have received from that community has been amazing, and to the point where we had some upheaval in our life just in the last few weeks. I had to consciously reach out and say, hey, this is going on, and I just need people to know. I need to not be holding this on my own. And the care that came back to me from my community, it wouldn't have been there if I hadn't made that step, I don't think. But so I've created a feedback loop there. And then I haven't figured out how to create a feedback loop in the cultural and the collective yet. But hey, that's what I'm here for. That's, that's kind of my driving force behind all of my work, is how do we get our culture caring for parents better? How do we get parents out of the margins? Because I think this is an unpopular opinion, but I think that all parents are marginalized. We start off as part of our community, and then we have a kid, and suddenly it's like, oh, you can come, but keep the kid quiet, or just go play in that playground over there or in that play group. And if you want to work, you have to give us your wages to look after your kid. And anyway, I could go on and on. So how do we change our culture to actually include parents and families so that we're not worried? How do we include children in our community better so that we're not getting side eye from people at the grocery store because our kids are being kids,
Yeah, I really like the model there, and I can see how it is not even a two-way street. It is a loop, it is a circle, and it takes one of those things to start. For sometimes it might be that that an external factor starts that off. It could be that somebody goes, oh, I'm going to take my kids to the park tomorrow afternoon after school. Do you just want me to take yours as well? And you can get them in an hour or so, and then you've got an hour to breathe. Like, then you can do your self-care. But I think a lot of the time it does have to start with the parent seeking to do the self-care first, which is so difficult when you're exhausted from doing all the giving all the time.
Yeah.
But I do hold hope that the parent, the family, that community, they're the things that make up the culture and the broader society. So the more that we are having these conversations, and even more than that, practicing it ourselves to give the other people that we know permission to do it for their self, not that they need permission, but sort of to see that it can be done and that the world doesn't fall apart for doing that because it's seen as so selfish. That it's a groundswell that happens when enough of us take it seriously, and perhaps getting to the people who are pregnant or considering becoming parents before they are in this mire that everyone finds themselves in that first year, because we're not prepared properly for it.
Yeah, we're just told like we're not going to have any sleep, and that's about it, you know.
Yeah.
Get the horror stories from people. Well, wait, you just wait.
I got a wait until they're 23 and they don't want to know you yesterday from someone.
Wow. I would love to go just circle back to self-care for a second, please, as well, because my take on self-care for parents is that it needs to actually be something that suits the season of parenting you're in, and that can be done like in the fray of parenting. Particularly, that's something I've had to learn because I've just literally had no time to myself for the first 6 years of my child's life, basically. Very little time. And so finding those sort of pockets of time, and also finding practices that you can do with your kids right there. So an example I have is that I put on music, just one song, and dance to it. I might be cleaning while dancing, or I might just be having a dance break. And because my child doesn't like all of my music, I sometimes put my headphones on, but I'm just like headphones on, dancing in the corner while my child is doing their own thing, and I'm still monitoring them, but I'm like getting to just change my state, you know, and enjoy something just for the pure pleasure of it. I'm not, you know, particularly when I'm not cleaning and dancing, but I have to dance to clean. I won't clean without the dancing. So, but sometimes I just dance for the sake of it, and just doing something just for the sake of it, just for the fun of it as a parent, is radical in itself, because we have such a lot of work to do and so many things that we have to tick off of our to-do lists. And we've got this real like intensive parenting ideology that is the main way of parenting. And so we've got to be present for our children and always there and always regulated and always gentle. And it's a lot to ask of someone who doesn't get any time to do the things they love. And so finding ways to do it, that's what I'm about. And finding ways, like I meditate on my child. I will sit, not sit on my child and meditate. I realized what that sounded like. I will sit and watch them play and just take in, I'll feel the support of the ground beneath me. I'll feel the temperature of the air. I'll notice my breathing. I'll maybe wonder, what are they thinking? And what's life like through their eyes right now? And just really taking that moment as that's a meditation, and doing accessible yoga. So sitting on a chair and doing a seated twist and a side stretch. Like I don't need to roll the mat out and do half an hour for it to count as self-care. I could probably do half an hour of yoga throughout the day, but it's in just little moments. It's a a downward facing dog, but a standing one against the wall, or, and just finding those ways and like orienting to pleasure and orienting to joy. Like how can I just bring a tiny bit more pleasure into this? Could I I don't know, put an essential oil on in a burner right now? Or could I, how can I engage my senses while I'm parenting right now?
Because it's to bring yourself back out of the head things to do list. Anything that is sensual with the senses.
Yeah. Off of the hamster wheel. That's the feeling I have if I don't consciously bring myself back to me and to my senses and my body. I just go all day.
Because then, there will be always things to do. There's always more things.
Yeah, that horrible thing at the end of the day where someone says, "What did you do today?" Like, I have no idea.
Somehow we're both alive.
Yeah.
But other than that, I've got nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So whereas now I can go, oh, I've burnt some lavender oil.
It's getting rid of that whole conception of it, isn't it?
Yeah. And also there's the capitalist form of self-care that is like, oh, you've got to take a bubble bath and you've got to do all of these things, but they're usually things that can't really be done with a child in tow. And so there's this whole idea of self-care seems to get equated with indulgence and with buying things.
Extravagance, yeah.
When actually there's an OT on Instagram. I believe their handle is Make Daisy Chains, but they created a zine called Boring Self-Care, and it's just the best. It's illustrated, and it's like, today I did my washing. Yeah, it's like the things that you kind of have to do to care for yourself. It's much better than just washing. I'm giving a very bad example, but that was a turning point for me too, that those illustrations and self-care, it's been sort of commandeered, if that's the word, by capitalism. I can't think of the right word. It's been taken by capitalism and made into, this is what self-care is. And so when people think of self-care, they think of that extravagance often, or going on a retreat or doing a full hour of yoga first thing in the morning.
Yeah, but you also have to get up at 4 a.m. to do that, which means that you won't sleep. So
yeah, exactly.
Not going to work. Not at this season of life anyhow.
Yeah.
You've mentioned Taro, you've mentioned accessible yoga, voice, all of these incredible modalities and more that you have in your skill set. Do you have any other tools, tips, techniques, or anything else you would like to share with us that are some really tangible starting points that you might use with clients?
Yeah, I think I've already mentioned this one, but I'll mention it again because it's the first thing I teach anyone. And it's the thing that I come back to over and over again. And that's just a really simple grounding technique. You could call it a meditation, or you could just call it a practice, depending on what language feels best for you. And it's really simply bringing your awareness to the weight of your body on the surface that you're resting on. So I'm sitting in a chair. I can feel the chair supporting the weight of my body. I can feel my feet on the ground. And just noticing the response that your body has to that support. And it's that sensation of support that I just come back to again and again. And it's the foundation of trauma-informed yoga. It's how I do my tarot readings too. I did it before this session, and I've been coming back to it throughout. When I get, overexcited, come back to that support. Yeah.
And I'm doing it as you talk through it each time as well. And I can feel how it allows my legs and feet and everything to soften and accept that support. And even just feeling that there is something there that wants to support me, we can then practice receiving that support to receive the offers of help, service from wherever else it's coming from. It's a good reminder, because we're so trained to reject the need for any kind of help, any kind of softness, but it's so essential. Jess, thank you so much for your time today. Where can we find you?
My favorite place to hang out is Instagram, and my handle there is Liberated Parenthood, and my website is the same, liberatedparenthood.co. C-O. I always tell people it's not a typo. There's not an M on the end of there. liberatedparenthood.co.
It's a beautiful website there too, and Jess beautifully lists a lot of the mentors and teachers that they have worked with through their journey, and I think that's such a wonderful thing to do, to be, as you say, appreciative rather than appropriative.
That's Susanna Barkataki. I'm just going to say that's where I learned that, appreciative rather than appropriative.
So do go out, check out Jess's work, and I'm sure you will not be disappointed.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Anna Asks. If you'd like to support this podcast and contribute to the payment of the diverse guests we learn from, please head to www.annacusack.com.au/podcast. While you're on the website, you can click around and grab my book, Mama You're Not Broken, download my free 6 Steps to Your Peaceful Postpartum e-guide, or check out ways we can work together. Let's continue the conversation on Instagram and Facebook too, @AnnaCusackPostpartum. Remember to hit subscribe on your podcast app, and until next episode, bye for now.